Hey everybody, welcome back. This week we're going to talk about intimacy avoidance. It has a couple of names that you may have heard, like sexual anorexia or the anorexic marriage, sexual intimacy avoidance. There's all kinds of terms that are floating around this topic. So we're going to have a brief overview around it because we all deal with it in our practices probably more often than most of you would think. I really want to be clear. The purpose of this video, this newsletter, is not to diagnose you or your spouse as having a disorder, and it's not stating that withholding sexual intimacy right after the discovery or the disclosure of an affair is wrong. It's not, because rebuilding intimacy is a journey. And it takes time, and it's not done overnight. I also want to caution all of you about using labels that can shame each other. We're talking about a complex condition or issue that needs understanding, it needs compassion, and it needs healing for both the individual and the couple. So what is intimacy anorexia? The question is more common than you may think. First, let me explain the entities that are involved in a marriage. A traditional, common view of marriage, we talked about this a few weeks ago, is that it consists of two entities, you and your spouse. But we here at Affair Recovery think about it just a little bit differently. We believe that a marriage consists of you, your spouse, and the couple, or us is what we might call it. Both spouses have to engage with each other for there to be a healthy sense of the couple or the us. Anorexia is a Greek word, and the prefix an means without, and the word orexis means appetite. That comes from the Oxford Dictionary. Marital anorexia is a marriage where either one or both partners lack or are without appetite for the marriage. In other words, it's a marriage where one or both partners compulsively withhold themselves from the marriage or from one another. Anorexia nervosa, which is the most familiar meaning of anorexia, is the addictive disorder where the individual is obsessed with losing weight by refusing to eat. Unlike many other addictions, it differs from how we normally think about an addiction in that it is a negative addiction. Oftentimes, someone suffering from anorexia is every bit as obsessed with food as the alcoholic or the heroin addict is with their drug of choice. The only difference is that the one form of addiction is about consumption, and the other is about restriction. As with drug addictions, food addictions like anorexia or bulimia require more and more of what does not work and can eventually lead to death. Researcher Patrick Carnes and others have written about sexual anorexia and intimacy anorexia. Sexual addiction is something most of us have heard about, but frequently we fail to see the opposite side of the same coin, the negative addiction. The sexual anorexic has a lack of desire for a relationship of a sexual or intimate nature. And for sex addicts, beyond their addictive behaviors, such as prostitutes, pornography, strip clubs, and other extramarital relationships, like limerent relationships, the intimacy anorexic withholds emotional intimacy from their mate, and even when it's damaging to their mate and to themselves. Treating anorexia isn't as easy as just treating the negatively addicted person. Long ago, therapists discovered that the addict could change and have their disorder under control. But when they returned to the family system, they would often relapse. Treating what we call the identified patient wasn't sufficient for sustained change to occur. To succeed, the whole family had to alter their pattern of interactions. They believed that unless addicts and co-addicts change concurrently, the relational shift brought on by the alcoholic's recovery can leave the couple incapable of relating to one another as they once had. In his book, The Four Loves, C.S. Lewis points out that the consequence of choosing to make sure your heart is protected is a losing opportunity to be alive. He says that to love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything, and your heart will certainly be wrung and possibly be broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give your heart to no one, not even an animal. Wrap it up carefully around with hobbies and little luxuries and avoid all entanglements. Lock it up safe in a casket or a coffin of your selfishness. But in that casket, safe and dark, motionless, airless, it will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, irredeemable. The alternative to tragedy, or at least to the risk of tragedy, is damnation. The only place outside of heaven where you can be perfectly safe from all dangers and perturbations of love is hell. That's C.S. Lewis. The impact of infidelity can bring the onset of marital anorexia with incredible speed, even if neither party was withholding themselves in the relationship prior to an affair. The impact of infidelity and the ensuing shock waves are capable of leaving one or both parties obsessed with withholding from the relationship and each other. And as with the person who is obsessed with losing weight by refusing to eat, the marital anorexic is obsessed with avoiding any painful or uncomfortable interactions by refusing to engage with their spouse. In the same way, the food anorexic suppresses their appetite to avoid the feelings of hunger, the marital anorexic suppresses their feelings of love to avoid the desire to engage with their mate. There are volumes written about relational anorexia by men and women, much smarter than me. So this is just a very brief overview. Having said that, here are just a few characteristics of marital anorexia. First is an avoidance of engaging with other couples. As individuals, we need friends who are safe people to talk to. Marriages are no different. They also need other couples with which to interact. However, when one or both parties are obsessed with avoiding interacting with their mate, there's not enough sense of the us to engage with other couples. Second is relational falsification. Food anorexics are body dysmorphic, which means they have distorted view of their appearance. Even though they may be 5'5" and 90 pounds, when they look in the mirror, they see themselves as overweight. The same is true for the anorexic marriage. It's not conscious oftentimes, but when the marital anorexic evaluates their relationship with their mate, it appears distorted, unfulfilled, and in want of something far more than what they have. Third is this distancing behaviors. This behavior could be described by closed body language such as, crossed arms, avoidance of eye contact, and other stonewalling tactics. It also might appear in conversations that are either shallow or controlling, or when short answers are given to questions. And there's this energy of impatience and irritation. It can be heard in their tone of voice. Additionally, time at home is avoided by sometimes spending much more time with friends or at work or in other activities. And fourth is this unwillingness to share your feelings. They leave each other in the dark regarding how they're feeling. A spouse may discuss day-to-day necessities, but beyond that, they will avoid conversations altogether. And fifth is this unwillingness to be positive or just to give simple compliments. Marital anorexics avoid saying anything positive about their spouse for the fear that their mate will mistake it as a sign that they might be interested in the relationship or in intimacy. They tell themselves that they don't want to give their mate false hope by being kind or attentive or something like that. And sixth is blaming. In the anorexic marriage, there's a good chance that neither party will take personal responsibility, and they'll end up blaming each other for their problems. So those are just some of the characteristics. There are more. But here are a few suggestions for addressing marital anorexia. First is acknowledgement. You know, Rick always says, you probably heard him say it, if you can't accept where you're at, you'll never get to where you're going. I can hear him in my head when I hear that. The first step is to acknowledge there's a problem. If you don't do that, well then, nothing is going to change. Second, there's couples group work. Here's the thing we know is that without witnessing other couples and their interactions, it's far easy to deceive yourself into believing the lack of interaction between you and your spouse is normal. The safe and expert-guided group process is one of the most powerful ways to facilitate change and engagement in your marriage. This is the biggest reason why we do so much couples group work at the EMS weekend and the online version of that course. Third is empathy development. As human beings, we need to know that we matter to our mate, that they want to be with us, that they are going to be there for us. We need to know that they care enough to seek to understand us and to let us get to know them. It's a two-way street. A simple exercise is to facilitate this understanding is for a husband and a wife to share one feeling that they had at some point during the day, and then to share that the first time they ever felt that feeling. And the next is to share something they appreciate about each other. Empathy development is not easy, especially if you didn't receive it as a kid, but it's so essential. It's one of the most essential components of the EMS weekend and EMS online. Without concentrated effort, many times true empathy appears elusive to the unfaithful spouse. In their own mind, they've been empathetic and remorseful. However, in reality, they've seemed disengaged and their spouse is left wondering, do you really want to be with me? And fourth is this established rituals of engagement and cherishing, if you will. If there has been a lack of engagement or the appetite to engage, developing pathways to occur is critical. Here are just a couple of simple little ideas. Start by maybe kissing each other as you part in the morning, as you go your separate ways. And then making it maybe a goal to hug each other, hold each other for 60 seconds at the end of the day. That could be another approach to beginning to overcome these fears of re-engaging. Research shows that it's the small, measurable steps that will lead couples in the right direction over time of reestablishing intimacy. And fifth, identify the personal barriers to engaging in the marriage and then address them. Each party needs to identify what makes it difficult for them to re-engage. If it's bitterness or resentment, then that needs to be addressed. Each party will need to develop a compassionate heart for their mate, for themselves and for the relationship, in spite of what's been transpired. In taking your own personal inventory, identifying why it would be difficult to be married to you goes a really long way in shifting the perspective of the marriage. We have to remember that my mate is not my problem, but my mate does reveal the problems in me. And I'm not saying that your mate doesn't have problems or issues, but if your spouse triggers a part of you that's just a trailhead for you to do some of your work. They have work to do, and they have their own trailheads that they've got to work on. So much more could be said, but hopefully this gives you an overview and some understanding of a really common problem, as well as some ideas on how to move forward. For me, it is totally understandable why couples come to the place of marital anorexia after infidelity. But it's really, really puzzling why someone would choose to stay there long term. Whether the problem existed before the infidelity or was triggered by the infidelity, it has the potential to affect your most significant relationships for the remainder of your life. Please have the courage to come out from behind the wall of self-protection and begin to take the risks, the small steps to both love and to let someone love you. If you or your relationship is struggling from marital anorexia caused by infidelity of any kind, then check out the EMS online course. It's a great step-by-step process to begin healing and building a new type of marriage. Please, please don't spend the rest of your life robbing yourself of intimacy, which we as humans were created by and for, and we so desperately need, whether we realize it or not. Thanks so much for joining me this week. I hope that gives maybe you and your spouse something to talk about. Please don't judge each other. Just begin to have conversations, simple conversations. And check out the EMS online course. Thanks so much for joining me. I'll be back again next week. Stay safe and stay healthy. Thanks so much.